Hello, and thank you for listening to THRIVECAST. My name is Dr. Tara Rowe from the University of North Florida and the director of the THRIVE program. THRIVE is a supplemental support program for UNF students with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. I'm excited to kick off our very own podcast channel known as THRIVECAST. Each episode will feature current, past, and even future THRIVE staff and students as we navigate topics related to our program. We are excited to share our unique stories from our own perspectives as we know firsthand how powerful our stories truly can be.
Hi everyone! This month we decided to focus on career exploration at UNF, the resources available on campus, and advice for students seeking employment right now. The unemployment rate in the US right now is at an all-time low. The last time that unemployment was this low, the first man walked on the moon. With many companies opting to work fully remote until mid-2021 at least, there are bound to be some changes to the application and hiring process. Because of that, we decided to speak with the job expert. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Audra Morrison, a career counselor for the Career Success Center here at UNF. So Audra, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Audra Morrison, and I work at UNF in the College of Arts and Sciences Career Success Center. Basically, what our office does is we try to help connect students with their careers in whatever form that may be. So some of the services we offer are resume reviews or cover letters, or maybe students who are interested in going to grad school, we help with your personal statements. We help students with finding internships, part-time jobs, full-time jobs, and we also do a lot of assistance with interviewing. So if students want to have a mock interview or a practice interview, we can help you with those, and just general interview skills development. One of our other big services is career exploration, and that's going to be for students who aren't exactly sure what they want to do with their major or with their future career. So we have conversations with those students about what some of their options might be based on their major or what some of their personal interests are that may impact their career. So that's basically what our office does, and I'm excited to be on this interview today.
We're excited to have you. I don't know much about the Career Center, so this is a cool thing for me to be learning too. So our first question is, how has the Career Center or the Career Success Center been impacted by COVID?
So since March, which is pretty much, I feel like when the whole COVID started impacting the university, all of our services have been remote since then. So that's going to be any of our career counseling appointments, any of our resume assistants, pretty much anything that is student facing is all remote. And those appointments are taking place via Microsoft Teams, which is a platform that all students have access to, and then also Zoom. In addition to our services being remote, also all of our events were moved to online events. So all of our big career fairs, our graduate school fair just passed, and that was online as well. We are on campus 3 days a week, and that is just to basically answer the phone, answer the door, and schedule appointments for students. So you can still stop in Tuesday through Thursday if you need to schedule an appointment, but just know that the service that you will receive will still be virtual.
So you can schedule in person for a virtual event?
Correct.
Got it. So our program director, Tara, actually had a question that she wanted me to ask you. We've spent so many years talking about interviewing in person and skills to do in-person interviews. And how has that changed with COVID? Are we still focusing in on like the team, people-oriented skills, or is it more of a self-initiated focus?
That's a good question. So as far as interviews go and the topics or the responses to the questions that you're getting in an interview, those really haven't changed. A lot of the standard interviewing practices are really still in place. The biggest change has been moving interviews from being in person to virtual. So prior to coronavirus, some people would have gone straight to an in-person interview immediately. whereas other companies may have done a phone interview or a virtual interview as like a precursor, and then you still would have come to do an on-site or an on-campus interview. But now with coronavirus, the biggest change is that movement to online interviews, whether that's a phone interview or a pre-recorded virtual interview or a live virtual interview. So those are kind of the three most popular, I guess, ways that interviews are being conducted. And the pre-recorded probably being one that students are the least familiar with, or it can seem scary or awkward for students because basically you're receiving a list of questions to respond to, and you're either recording yourself or you're doing the interview in a platform that's pre-recorded, and then the interview panel will watch your interview later. I've seen those pre-recorded ones even done via YouTube, and I myself, this is years ago before coronavirus, but I had to do a pre-recorded interview through YouTube. So it was just really different, and it's just not something that a lot of people are used to. So I would say that's definitely the biggest change. And then, of course, the live virtual interviews are typically on platforms that people are pretty familiar with, something like Zoom or Skype and things like that. So those are definitely I'd say the biggest changes. But as far as like the questions that companies are asking, or, the ways that we typically respond, or just our general interview etiquette, pretty much all of that is the same, with the biggest change being, proper etiquette with the virtual interview.
Yeah, I've never heard of a pre-recorded interview. That sounds kind of intimidating because you're just like sending it off.
Yes. Yeah. And also to not have like the interpersonal interaction that you're used to, just the back and forth conversations and knowing that you're talking to a human, So it's definitely, like I said, it's probably the one that's the most feared, or the most, just the biggest adjustment for sure.
Yeah. I guess that question ties into a following one that I had. Are there any other changes in skills and interviews that we should be focusing on, or we should be adjusting for, that have come about since the start of COVID?
So I'll expand a little bit more on the virtual interview etiquette and things that you should be keeping in mind, knowing that your interview is going to be virtual. So again, you should still be expecting the standard questions, tell me about yourself, what are your skills, what are your weaknesses, why are you interested in the job, the standard basic questions. But some of the more kind of etiquette focused things to think about are, the biggest one is making sure that you have access to a computer that has a camera and a microphone. That is a huge piece of this, because oftentimes we're seeing students trying to conduct these virtual interviews from their cell phone. And I cannot tell you how distracting it is to have someone who's talking on their phone like this, and they're moving the camera forward and backwards, and they're moving all around, and you're on an interview. It's very distracting. And a lot of times when someone's doing it from their cell phone, you hear a lot more background noise, especially if they're on speakerphone. So conducting an interview from your cell phone, unless it's a phone interview, is a no-no. If it's supposed to be pre-recorded or some sort of video recording, make sure you're doing that on a computer, because you have the stable, desk that's not moving, as opposed to holding your cell phone in your hand. So that's a big one. Another one is to make sure that you're minimizing any distractions, which can be hard, because when you're, going to an on-campus or, an on-site interview, you're kind of expecting the environment to be very sterile. You're probably going to be in a room with 2 chairs and a desk, and there's really not a whole lot going on to be a distraction. Whereas when you're at home, with many of us working from home and conducting our lives from our houses, there's a lot going on. So some common distractions to avoid would be definitely, probably number one, is having a pet anywhere near your office space, near your camera. I've seen a lot of people where their cat will jump up onto the desk. And again, it's cute. Everyone loves animals and pets for the most part, but it's a distraction for the interview. You don't want the interviewers to remember that person who had the cat jump on their desk. You'd rather have them remember you as that person who had really great interview responses. So pets are a big one. Even if your pet is in another room, and if it's a dog and it's barking throughout the entire interview, of course it's somewhat out of your control, but it's a huge distraction to the interview. So it's best to minimize any sort of pet interaction when you're doing a professional interview. Another one that I would say is that if you have other people in your house, so if there's several people working from home, maybe you're all in a shared space or something like that, try to seclude yourself as much as possible. Close the door that's behind you so we don't have to see people walking by. Try not to conduct your interview in a shared space like a living room where you're opening yourself up to someone interrupting you. Just things like that you wouldn't usually have to think of when you were going somewhere else for an interview. But when you're at home, these are things to think about. Also, when it comes to the environment, it's definitely better to conduct your interview from home rather than trying to go somewhere out in public, like Starbucks or Panera, where I know a lot of people like to do work in those places. There's free Wi-Fi, or even a library, because again, it's a shared space and you're opening yourself up to a distraction or an interruption. So it's best to be somewhere alone in a room where you have access to good internet. That's not going to be spotty. You're not going to lose connection, but you also have a well lit, good lighting and that sort of thing. So those are some things as far as the environment goes, and just kind of noises and distractions. And if you kind of if any students who are watching this want some more tips or some more detail, we actually made some of them are PowerPoints that are video recorded. Some of them are just like PowerPoint handouts. But we actually made a whole web page on our Career Success Center website that's for virtual strategies, whether that's conducting your job search, interviewing, etc. We started this kind of when the pandemic was really hitting and everything started to go virtual. We wanted to make sure that we made some resources for students in regards to that. So I would highly recommend that students check out our website and check out some of our virtual interviewing tips. Like I said, there should be a PowerPoint up and there should also be a handout that just has some tips on there.
That's really cool that you guys already have those resources out.
Yes, they're really great. And the only thing I'll say on that is our website is undergoing some ADA compliance changes. So they're having to go through all of our links. Mm-hmm. Some of our links may be temporarily unavailable depending on, what they're going through and what they're verifying at that time. So if you do go to our website and something says that it's missing or it's not currently available, just know that it should be back up shortly.
Good to know. Next question. What benefits have come out of COVID in terms of the workplace and career exploration and maybe the Career Success Center, if any benefits? If there's none, it's okay.
No, that's a really good question. And I like that you guys are kind of framing this one in a positive way because so many people just view this pandemic, as this horrible tragedy, which on the one hand it is, right? I mean, obviously mm-hmm. there's people who have been greatly affected in their work, in their personal lives. I mean, there's a lot of, negatives that have come out of the COVID-19, but there have been some interesting changes in business and in the workplaces, and there have been some positives. So one thing that I would say that has really been a positive with coronavirus is this emergence of online and remote work. Pre-COVID, most people did not work remotely unless they specifically had a job that was 100% intended to be a remote service. But now we have all of these people who have been shifted to remote and have, really liked it and realized that their productivity may be increased or that they're a lot happier working from home. And now this is a new option across a lot of companies that have moved these positions remote full time, rather than just having them temporarily remote and then moving people back once the coronavirus passes. So what this has really opened the door for is the opportunity to work from home, wherever that home may be, even if your job is in a different city or a different state. So for instance, think about people who live out in California. The cost of living there is extremely high, at least at a minimum double what it is here in Jacksonville, mm-hmm. and probably even closer to triple. And so, of course, their salary out there is adjusted accordingly because of the cost of living. But think about someone who was working in California, but can now live in Florida and have that same job, that same salary, but they're able to work from home. They're able to work from whatever location they want. And I've actually talked to a few people who were in that situation where they lived in a big city with a high cost of living, especially cities like New York, where there was a huge impact of coronavirus. So a lot of those people actually left and just to try to avoid catching coronavirus. And so they're, living in Florida or living somewhere else, but still making that New York City salary. So that's one of the biggest positives is, number one, the new flexibility of being able and having that luxury to work from home, but also being able to work in or out of your state. So I'd say that's one huge positive. And another one, even though there have been some smaller companies have probably definitely suffered during this pandemic, some other industries are actually booming, and they're hiring more than ever. Things like the healthcare industry obviously is really booming right now. Anything that's e-commerce, everyone is buying stuff online because they're not wanting to go to stores. Things with logistics and delivery services, those types of industries are really booming right now. And so there's a lot of jobs in those industries. And although it may not be, a student's first choice, they may have not, went to school and thought, oh, I'm going to go work for Amazon when I graduate. That may not have been their original plan, but there's opportunities there and there's jobs that have really decent pay. So it's kind of opened up this new job market for people who have more of a flexible mindset and are willing to kind of entertain those types of jobs.
Okay. Our last question is, what are your biggest pieces of advice for students in the Thrive program who are currently going through career exploration or applying to jobs?
My biggest advice to any student on campus would be anyone who's kind of going through the job search or, kind of the career exploration phase is, number one, keep in mind that it's extremely important to target your resume to the job you're applying to. If you're just sending out a generic resume, you're going to have probably a lot less success and probably hear back from fewer companies that you're sending it out to, because they can tell if it's generic and that it's not specific to them. They want to feel special and they want to feel like, you want to work for them. Another tip would definitely be to keep that open mindset. Just like on the previous question where I was saying there's a lot of companies that may not have been your first choice. It may not have exactly been what you went to school for, but maybe the industry that you did go to school for has been heavily impacted by coronavirus. So in those cases, it's important to keep an open mindset during your job search, especially during this time, rather than feeling that you're obligated to work in one specific field, especially since, not knowing if the company you wanted to work for was impacted or not. Some companies are under hiring freezes right now, some aren't. And because of that, the getting hired process is a lot slower right now. Just the time it may take to hear back, the time it may take to go through the interview process, and the time to actually get hired and actually start working can take a long time. And sometimes students don't understand that. Even pre-coronavirus, it took a long time, but now it's even slower for some companies. So being patient and having that open mindset, but also being persistent. It's bound to happen in a job search. You're going to hear no, you're going to get turned down from companies, but don't let that break your spirit, because that's just a part of the process. There's always going to be barriers, and it's important to just be persistent, keep applying and keep trying. And if you realize that you're getting turned down from several companies, maybe reevaluating and trying to figure out, why weren't those a good fit? Was it that you didn't have enough experience? Was it that it wasn't the right industry? And on the topic of experience, right now, the times that the world is in, it's a great opportunity to capitalize on internships and gaining experience through whatever that may look like, volunteering or part-time work, to ensure that when you do graduate, you're as qualified as you could possibly be when you're ready to start looking for those full-time jobs. So I would highly recommend, with all of that I just said, definitely using our office as a resource, using the UNF job portal, which is called Handshake. Every student has access to it. It's located in your MyWings account, and that's where you can look for full-time, part-time, and internship opportunities that are specifically for UNF students. So definitely using Handshake and definitely using our office as a resource with any questions you have regarding your job search or just your process of exploring the careers that you're interested in.
Thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to share all the information. And if anyone who's listening has any other questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us. If you would like to come into our office to schedule your appointment, we're located in Building 8, which is the same building as Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is on the first floor. We're located right upstairs on the second floor. And then you can also call our office or send us an email with any questions that you may have.